So the purpose ultimately for the work that we do is to empower land managers and local governments with information that they can use to make more informed decisions about how to manage those natural assets. So in some cases, they might be looking to conserve natural assets because they provide really critical stormwater management services. In some cases, they might be looking to enhance natural assets because perhaps they're degraded and not providing the level of service that they otherwise could. And perhaps in some cases, they're looking to make decisions about trade-offs. Do we develop land here or in another place? And they can consider the location of those natural assets, the services those natural assets provide, and make a more informed decision. It's also useful when they're making decisions about investing in built infrastructure. So in some cases, especially when we talk about stormwater management, local governments will have the choice. They can pursue the enhancement or construction of a wetland or a stormwater pond to help them capture, store, and retain water in a storm scenario, or they could be considering maybe the building of a dike. And in both cases, those assets, whether it's a built dike or a wetland, may be providing stormwater management. And by considering the role that natural assets can play in stormwater management, they're able to essentially evaluate that on a level playing field with the built asset, and so make a more informed decision about what's the best course of action to achieve that stormwater management service. And often it's the case when we look at the role that natural assets can play in stormwater management, we should be taking into account all of the other services that come with that natural asset. So a dike is useful for stormwater management and perhaps some recreation, depending on how it's built. But a wetland, of course, can provide that as well as carbon storage and sequestration, perhaps aesthetic value, which might increase property values. So we have to consider the full range of services provided by the natural assets. We work closely with every municipality that we engage with to make sure that we're accessing the best, the most up-to-date, and the most comprehensive data. And then we're able to combine that in GIS in a way that allows us to assign a hierarchy so that depending on the particular asset we're considering, we can choose to draw on one data set or another to make sure that the package at the end of the day, which is the integrated spatial data layer that contains the inventory, is using the best information for any given asset and location. So here we have an example of one of the online dashboards that Green Analytics creates for MNAI and local government that we're working with. And there's 4 different tabs to any dashboard that we create at a minimum. And each contains different information in terms of how we have organized and assessed the natural assets. So in this case, what you see, for example, in the top right is an interactive map of the distribution of the natural assets by municipality. And so a user can click on any particular municipality within the jurisdiction under consideration and get a breakdown of the natural assets contained within that municipality. And you will have noticed as I clicked on one municipality versus another, that the table here in the bottom left and the figure just above have updated. So here we're getting summaries of the natural assets just contained within that subset area that we're considering. On the bottom right here, you have a map of the entire distribution of natural assets within the area that we were looking at. And we've got a small table here demonstrating natural assets as a percent of the total area that we considered across the different municipalities. The dashboards are largely interactive, so they allow us to focus in on any particular region, like I said, with the municipality here in the top right map, but you can also focus in on any particular asset. So here I want to get a sense of just the forest assets. Here we have a table now that has updated to focus just on the number of assets that are forest, their associated area, and a series of other attributes associated with just those forest assets. And we could do the same for the riparian, or we could use the control key to select even more than one asset. And now we're looking at the distribution and the number of assets that are just riparian or wetland. It's really the land managers, I think, that can make informed decisions, drawing on the inventory and how it's presented in the dashboard, so they can know the distribution of their assets. In this particular tab, we've focused in on the natural asset by subcatchment within the jurisdiction that we're looking at. And you can see, for example, that there's a high density of natural assets in this one subcatchment area. So that's something that's going to be informative for land managers, because they're going to want to consider how they manage the assets in that area to ensure that the services that they're providing remain over time. So we have, when I focus in particular on that subcatchment, we can see that it is a combination of largely forest, but also some riparian and wetland assets. And we could then consider the condition of those assets in the context of the services that they provide, and make decisions about perhaps enhancing them or conserving them. If it's a subcatchment that provides water services, drinking water services, then we want to make sure that they're getting protected and enhanced to the greatest extent possible to protect that supply of drinking water. So if we look at the summary page for this dashboard, and in particular the figure in the top right, you can see that the area that we looked at here is not just one municipality, but in fact several. And so the dashboard speaks to the need for these multiple jurisdictions to work together to manage their natural resources. It's often the case that a jurisdiction relies on assets outside of their boundary for some of the services that are provided by those assets. So thinking in particular of something like drinking water provision, if we think about the city of Calgary, the drinking water for the city of Calgary comes from the entire Bow River watershed, which is far beyond the jurisdictional boundary of the city of Calgary. And so how those resources or assets are managed can have a very significant impact on a local government, yet they have very little control over how those assets are managed. So this is another example where we see multiple municipalities that can all play a role in managing the assets and the services those assets provide. And it has been demonstrated in Canada and elsewhere that investing in natural assets is a much more cost-effective way to increase climate resilience and adaptation than investing in built assets.